Welcome to this video where we're going to be looking at Enzyme and React testing library. I built this small application called Bart's Burritos, and it's a fairly simple app. You can just add stuff to your burrito order and it'll give you the current price, which updates each time you add or remove an item, as you can see, and that's pretty much it. And what we want to do here is we want to just test using Enzyme and React testing library and look at the differences. So what we're going to be testing is, do the line items show? Does the price update? Do we get images? Do we get the description? And also, do we get the title? So let's go ahead and let's remove these from the basket actually right now. And if you're not familiar with Enzyme or React testing library, they basically help you get confidence in your code by writing unit tests. So I'm sure most people are aware of as to what unit tests are. If you're not, this video probably isn't the one to start with, because in this video we're going to be looking at how we can implement these tests in Enzyme, and then we're going to be looking at how we can implement them in React testing library. So what I've got here, if I just close this for a second, I have two windows open. This one is the React testing library one that we're going to be working with. This one is the Enzyme one. Anytime I'm switching between the windows, I've tried to keep it obvious as to which one I'm in. So the red one will be Enzyme, the blue one will be React testing library. I'll open up the application. We have a basic application which you'll see is pretty much the same. There's a few different data test IDs on the React testing library one as on the Enzyme one as opposed to the React testing library one. But we do have these components in here, and I'll use this one as an example just because the 99.9% the same. So if we just click on the app.js, you can see we've got some state. So we keep the order items as to what's being ordered. We have a menu, and then we have order component. Both of these come from the components folder. So we have the menu, which just does a simple map of items, and these items are basically coming from a data.json file, which is this here. So you've got different burritos. So you have like the name, the image, description, price, availability, and the spice. The spice rating is visualized just using a chili. So if you have 2 spice on the key and the value is 2, you'll have 2 chilies. So if we take a look just once more at the code, and we can look at the order.js. Here we're doing if there's order items and the order items.length is greater than 0, go ahead and show the total price and then do a quick reduce over the total cost. And this updates every time when you add an item to basket or remove an item from basket. This one here, this particular piece of code here, basically just says it looks like you have an empty stomach order now. That just displays when there's no items in the basket. So let's take a look at menu. So we've just got a section, header, a div that just holds the menu items. Then we have the burritos. The burritos get passed in from app.js, the burritos here, and the data comes from data.json, which is the one I just showed you. The item is basically just adding and removing, so we hold some state up here, whether it's in the order or not. And we have a data test ID. We have an on-click that just says, if it's in the order, don't add it into the order. If it's not in the order, add it into the order. And then here we have remove or add. And that's pretty much it. We have a data test ID on the image as well. We're using item that gets passed down as a prop. And that's pretty much it. Also this function here, set order items, then order items, so we can just re-add them into state. So if I just put this back now, we can do a quick comparison before I get rid of the sidebar so you can actually see the code. If we look at the setup.tests, we're doing the standard stuff within Enzyme where you have to do a setup test.js file. I mean, you can name this differently if you want, but you have to configure, get the adapter and the configure function, pass in the adapter with a new adapter. And then if we look at the package.json file, I'll just have to close that a second. What we have in here is standard package.json file, which is very similar to this one. But you can see the differences here. We have setup files after env, and we just call setup test.js. And then for our dev dependencies, we have Enzyme, adapter React 16. In the React testing library, we just have React testing library / React. Different packages you can pull out of testing library. So go ahead and look at that if you wish, but we're just going to be using this at the moment. So close these down. So let me pull up the burrito once more. So as you can see here, what we're going to test for the menu, which is the left side here, this huge list essentially, is we want to test out the menu renders with, I don't know, 1 burrito, 2 burritos, and we can maybe test that there's one in the basket, so we can hit some coverage on there. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to start out with Enzyme, and we're going to look at selecting by the data test ID, which I always find can be quite tedious, but I'll show you how to do it in React testing library as well. But we're just going to be looking for what's on the page instead. So you'll find that with Enzyme, you'll see a lot of people online talk about people testing implementation, and in React testing library, people are testing the behavior. So if you're moving from, say, Enzyme to React testing library and just want to get a quick overview as to what's different, you'll find that with React testing library, you get a small toolbox as opposed to Enzyme, where you get a large toolbox of tools and everything else that exists in the toolbox, unicorns, wherever it may be. React testing library, you just get given a small set of tools, and within that toolbox you have all the things you essentially need to be able to test your application and get confidence in the behavior. So to summarize, rather than the test focusing on the implementation with Enzyme, tests are more focused on the user behavior in React testing library. And I will demonstrate this very shortly, but I just want to give you a quick synopsis as to how we're going to be testing this. We're just going to be basically doing the menu and the order. We can pick up coverage for the item by rendering the item. And personally, I come from an Enzyme background, and I've eventually moved over to Enzyme. And I really do like the React testing library methodology, where we can essentially just set up by just doing one quick install. There's no configuration of a file. You know, both React testing library and Enzyme have great documentation. Let's have a look. You'll find this here. So you've got an API reference for Enzyme, and also with your React testing library, you have a nice quick cheat sheet. So we'll be using a lot of this stuff in here. So like get text by, query by text, query all by text, all these nice selectors. And that's essentially what they are. They're just selectors, and we're just going to be testing these. And this is all you really need for initial setup. We'll grab the render, we can act the structure from the render. So like get by text, find by text, and then fire events also in there, which is really nice, which allows you to simulate clicks. So the barrier to entry that I find, because you only have to do one quick install with RTL, which is React testing library, is a lot easier than Enzyme. You don't have to set up any test file or any sort of adapters. You simply just install the package and that's it. So you'll find that React testing library guides us to think more with the best practices by using selectors, by allowing us to make it easier to test accessibility features. You know, it gives us more stable tests and allows us to test the user's behavior as opposed to the implementation. No longer are we testing props and state. We're going to be doing that from a user's perspective. Can I click on this button and will it update state and give me the correct state? That's what we're going to be testing. So anyways, let's jump into the code, because that's what everyone's here for, right? So let's take a quick look. I've basically set up 2 test files in both menu and order, and I'll just close this down. We're going to start with the menu, and in Enzyme we're just going to set it, and we're going to say renders the menu with 2 burritos and 1 already in the basket. And I'll just pull this over slightly. We'll do test for test. I think that'll be quite nice to see. So const order items equals current order items. And what we're doing here, we're just initializing some stuff to pass down to the component. So we know that the menu component takes burritos, order items, and set order items. I'm just going to give it a jest.fn, which is just basically a mock function. So I can do test on this and say, look, did it get called? And this is essentially the same across Enzyme and also with React Testing Library, because this is jest that we're using here. So let's create a wrapper. Generally, this is what you'll find in Enzyme. You'll create some sort of wrapper that mounts the component, and we're going to be using a full mount here. We're not going to be shallow mounting where we don't get the child components, because I don't find that you get much confidence from that. So anyways, let's import the menu, which is up here. Make sure you've got that there, and then we'll say the burritos takes in 2 burritos, and this is coming from a fixture file. This fixture file sits here, and you have 2 burritos, which is just an array with 2 objects, and it's 2 standard burritos. And then we want to pass down the order items. So once we've got the order items, which is just 1 order item, so we want to check that the menu displays not only our burritos, but there's also other functionality that exists in there that we want to test. So if we just pass down set order items, then we close that, give it a save. So we now have a wrapper, and what we're going to be doing with this wrapper is using it throughout our tests. And we're going to say, let's create a selector to begin with. Actually, let's do a selector to find the add item one. So what is the add item one? So if we just do a search add item, in the item we pass down a data test ID of add item, and then we pass down the ID of the burrito, which is unique and doesn't change. So we can go back and use this as a reliable selector and say wrapper.find. We'll pass down a data test ID of add item 1. And we want to make sure that's in there. So by doing so, we can do expect wrapper.find. We'll also want to make sure that we have a length of 2 burritos, because do you remember earlier when I was showing you the fixtures, and in that fixtures we have 2 burritos, which is here. So we want to pass that down, and we'll say that's called item, and we'll do .length. We'll close that to B2. Then from here we'll just select this again once more, and we're going to select that the item has a data test ID of spice1, and we want to make sure that the text of that spice is a chili. So we need some sort of emoji. There we are. And then the next thing we want to test that the header's in there. So we want to test that it's called a wet burrito, because if we go to 2 burritos, we can see that's called wet burrito, and it's got a spice of 1, so we're only going to pass down 1 chili. But now we just want to test that the spice is just 1 chili, and then we want to test that the heading. So item heading 1 is a wet burrito. And that looks good to me. So I think we should start just checking this. So if I just pull up a terminal here, and then we'll run this yarn test coverage, watch all false, we should hopefully get some expectations, and there we are. We have some failures, and I can see we need to, I've written that wrong. So if we just put that in here, and then we should have let's see here, data test ID equals item dot length. I see. You need to go there, and also you need to go there. So with RTL, I don't have to do this, and I kind of fall into the bracket of hell, I would call this. where you can easily put a bracket at the wrong place and then your tests start failing. I mean, it's great that it tells you, but it's not very great when you're having to write those out and you want to get through as much as possible. So that one's going to fail, which is good because we already know there's no test in order.spec. But if I just go ahead and let's say we should have in here a public, not public, sorry, let's look at test source fixtures. We've got the setup file. Pull this up. We should have a coverage file in a coverage folder. We should have a coverage folder. So click in here. Click into index.html. Fixtures we won't worry about. We can remove that because it doesn't make much sense to have it in there. And you can see that you've got entire coverage, but we still want to do some expectations around what's going on. So I'll keep that open for now. I'll just take that off the screen because I don't want to distract you. But we have one pass, one failed. We'd have to worry about the failure. And we do have these are passing right now, but we still want to get more confidence within our tests. So what we're going to be doing is I'll clean that terminal shell. We want to write some more expecs. So if we go ahead and do, let's pull that down. We want to say, instead of the heading here, we want to switch this to the description. And you'll find with unit tests, this is pretty much one of the quickest ways to just target things. So if you just do your wrapper.find in enzyme.text, check that the text is there and you expect that to be on the page at that particular time. And likewise, you can just keep copying and it speeds up your workflow. So here we're going to set item, set image 1 actually, because we do need to target that image and make sure that we've got some sort of image. But instead of doing the .text, we want to test that the prop, and this isn't a property in React, this is checking for the alt. So if the image is there, we should expect to have an alt text of wet burrito. Likewise, we also want to test that the image source is correct. So in Enzyme, you'll find that this is different to React testing library, and I do find with Enzyme that I much prefer seeing /images/ say in this case wet burrito. In React testing library, you'll see shortly that this is actually different. So I can go ahead and run this test one more time, and we can see that hopefully there's no failures and that these expectations are correct. If not, we can jump back in, refactor the tests. But we have the standard one, the one's failed, that's great, but we have expectations and you can see that we've got the entire coverage on menu. But I want to go a little further. I want to get as much confidence in this application and this particular component, so I'm going to keep going. And what we're going to test next, we're going to set expect selector. So our selector above .text to be add wet burrito, and this selector for us is the £5 burrito, and we want to be able to click that button. So we'll do wrapper.find and we'll do brackets data test ID equals add item 1, and we want to be able to simulate some sort of click on the button so that we can test from our perspective and the user's perspective, even though this is what we're going to be focusing more on with React testing library as opposed to Enzyme. But we want to do a click, so we're going to simulate a click, and once that click has been simulated, we want to test that the add item 1, so the button text for example, has changed to remove wet burrito. So if we just look at what we've done here, we have the add item 1 here, which is the selector. And we could use this particular selector multiple times. So in this case, I think it's glaringly obvious that we should just copy this, do the .text again, and then we want to say remove wet burrito. That basically is simulating that button's been clicked and then the text has changed on that button. And then what I want to do again, we want to test that we've clicked it again and it goes back to add wet burrito. So once we remove it, we want to be able to see that the text has gone back. So let's have a look at this, and that should give us good coverage. Granted, it was 100% before, but you get a lot more confidence in your application knowing that you've done an expectation around everything the user can possibly do with that particular component. So let's go ahead and run this. I'll give that a clean shell, and if we run this, we should hopefully see no failures apart from that one where the test file's empty. But we will get to that. But we have a failure. Well, that's good. So remove wet burrito. There we are. We should have a pipe as opposed to a removal. So if we look here, we've done expected to get a pipe but received a hyphen. So in my case, I actually believe if we're showing, let's have a look at the coverage. So if we go to, not the coverage, sorry, if we go to Bart's Burritos, you'll see that we have a pipe, but then we get in a hyphen. I think it's probably better if we change the component of item as opposed to removing with the hyphen to put a pipe, because we want to be consistent in the application. So in this case, the test should now pass, but we have changed a small detail in the component, which I think was very necessary in this case. And here we go. Your test suite must contain one particular test, and we've already mentioned that. We've still got 100% coverage, and we can see that by pulling up the code coverage here. It's a little bit bigger, and you can see we've got a 1x, which basically means it's ran over the menu once, and we're going over the section, which is the menu, once. But you can see here you have a 2x, which is basically saying, okay, we've got 2 burritos, which we expected, right? Because we've provided this component with 2 burritos from the fixture file, and we've mapped over the burritos 2 times, so we should have 2 items. Fantastic. So if we just go ahead and move that out of the way, and the next thing we're going to do is start looking at React Testing Library, how we can write this menu.spec file in React Testing Library. So this was fairly a big, somewhat of a big file, just for one small component, and we extensively tested that everything was there really. So, you know, the image, the description, the heading, can we add, remove, and re-add a burrito? And that's kind of what a user would be doing. So we want to do that now in React Testing Library. Look at the differences, see which is easier to read, see which is easier for a developer to just begin writing tests, whether it be a junior developer or a seasoned developer, which one makes most sense as well from a development standpoint. So let's go ahead and start writing the tests in React Testing Library. You can see a small difference here. You have mount that is imported from Enzyme. In React Testing Library, you have render and fire event. Granted, you don't have to pull in the simulation for a click from Enzyme's package, but within React Testing Library, you can pull in fire event. So you're pulling in basically just the stuff you need. And in this case, we only need the render because we can destructure everything we need out of there, such as get by text, as shown here. So you can get all the stuff here. So you've got your selectors, your queries. So get by, find by, query by, get all by, find all by, and query all by. And we're going to be using some of those, and we're just going to get them out of the render. And we're pulling in fire events, so we can do the same as what we did in Enzyme, where we simulate a click. So let's go ahead. I will pull this over here, and let's start writing this test, which was the Enzyme test for the menu in React Testing Library. So now what we can do, if we just scroll up a bit on here, we can just essentially copy this, and we'll have that it block. Close that, and what we'll say here is we'll pretty much grab the same 2 constants, and then instead of doing wrapper equals mount, what we're going to do is const, and then we'll show the structure. So get all by test ID, get by test ID, get by text, get by alt text. We're going to be using these selectors throughout, whether people call them selectors, query selectors, whatever they may be. We can select data by them. So we can grab data by the test ID, by the text, by the alt tags. So yeah, and we can get these out of render, which comes from React Testing Library up here. And then what we can do, we can pretty much just get the same component, paste that in there, and we can start writing our expects. So instead of doing the selector, what we can do here, we can just do expect get all by test ID, and we're going to query for item, and then we're going to check the length to be 2, which is pretty much the same as this. And you can see, if you just look at this from a readability standpoint, you'll see that this makes a bit more sense to somebody who probably hasn't seen any sort of testing before, or any sort of programming language from a perspective of someone who's never used it. You can just look at this and think, okay, I want to expect get by test ID. Sure, not many people will know that, but if you did expect get by text to be a spice, the chili spice emoji, you could probably understand what's going on there. So I like this a lot more than what we got over here, but let's continue on, and I can show you how we can write the dot text, the heading, and we can just basically just do expect get by text, which is my favorite selector, wet burrito, and we'll just say we want that to be truthy, and we can just pretty much copy all these and set an amazing burrito. And I think that was spelt with a lowercase. Yep. And then down here we want to also check that we can get the alt text, so we'll say get by alt text, and then what we'll do again is we want to get by test ID, which is the image. So we're just going to give it the test ID of 1, and then we'll check the dot source, and then instead of to be truthy, we'll say to be. Let me run this and I'll show you the difference in React Testing Library versus Enzyme, and this is where I believe Enzyme wins, simply because I like this format, this relative path, as opposed to the well, you'll see shortly. Let me run this right now. So if we back out of here and just say testing RTL and say yarn, run this. And we can just scroll up and we can see that it's expected to have this relative path, but it's actually give us the full path to the image. So depending where you're hosting your images, whether you're using a relative URL or you're just giving it the full URL, you could be using a local development which switches out this URL, and it could potentially break the tests if it goes into something like Team City, for example, or Circle CI. So you have to be a bit careful with that, because depending on where this is being run, whether it's being run on HTTP, HTTPS, whatever it may be, you could have failing tests. So this is one thing to watch out for. But we can fix that test by just putting that in there. But also do check this in whatever environment it's been run in, whether you've got a test environment or whether you're running this through some sort of test suite. Just be careful when it comes to the images, as I've managed to have a few problems with this before, believe it or not. But let's continue on. Next, we shall close this down. Let's just say expect get by text, and we want to mimic this here. So we want to say, can we get the add wet burrito? And you'll remember previously, and we'll say to be truthy on this as well. You remember previously that this had I think it may have been this one, it had a hyphen as opposed to a pipe. So I want to show you a failing, we'll look at the failing tests. And if you do have a failing test, like with Enzyme, you can do something like console.log wrapper.debug. And to mimic that in React testing library, you just grab debug and you can run it here. So let's just test that now so we can see the debugger working. So we can do .click, fire event .click, and we'll say get by test ID add item 1. So let's just see where we're at. So here we're simulating the click in Enzyme, and here we're just doing fire event .click. So you can see the difference already by just seeing how much shorter this is and how much more readable this is than having to do this in Enzyme. This just looks very messy. So we can just copy this, and we expect now that this should say remove wet burrito pipe 5. I think the reason I did hyphen before is it shows that you're removing the 5, but let's just be consistent in this case. And then we want one last expect to say essentially this, that it's gone back to normal once we've added, then removed, and then it should show add burrito again. So there we are, nice clean test file. It looks really nice in my opinion, as opposed to this. But you know, that's just my opinion. Don't take it as a fact, because it's definitely not. There's usages for Enzyme as there is usages for RTL. So let's just go ahead and run this test, and we should have a failing test, hopefully. And we'll check the failure, which is in item, and it should be, there we are. We've got one test suite failing already, so we should have 2. There we go. And it's saying it cannot find it, but you can see with the debugger, if I just make this full screen, you can see with the debug that we've actually got all the items coming through, which is nice. So all the HTML's there, and we can just go through and we can have a look that what we're expecting is actually there or not. So you see here, it's failing on this bit. So if I just close this down a second, and then we go into here and put the pipe back, go back into item, clear that out, run that test. So we have one failure for the empty test, which is order.js, and we still have the debug in there, but you can see that we do not have normal failures. So let me go ahead and take out the debug. We should have a nice clean test suite, and within here let's just grab this, which we will come to change in a second. Once we've done the Enzyme version of this, we'll just put hello, and then we shouldn't have a failing test. There we go, 2 tests pass, brilliant. So you've seen the React testing library version and you've seen the Enzyme version, and if I just put these together, you can do a quick comparison. Get rid of debug, there we go. And as you can see, you have 44 lines for this one here on the left, which is the Enzyme version, and over here with the React testing library version you have 36. Now don't worry about too much about lines, because it obviously doesn't make too much of a difference depending on the limit of the IDE or code editor that you're using. Obviously some will wrap, some will not. What you have to worry about most is just what makes most sense from a readability standpoint. Can you look at this and quickly see what the test is doing? This, you know, I'd have to look at it for a bit and to fully understand it, but with this one it's just nice and clean. This is how I would expect to see a nice clean test. And granted, it's only doing somewhat trivial stuff at this point, but it seems to me from a usability standpoint or a developer standpoint that if you just take a quick look at this, you're just browsing through the folders and you see this, you can pretty much understand what's going on. So what we can do here, if we take a quick look at the coverage reports, so on the left side we have Enzyme, and on the right side we have React testing library, and you can see they're exactly the same. Even if I just zoom in, hopefully you can see that. You can see that the item's been covered because it gets ran through kind of somewhat of an integration test by using the menu. And you can also see it over on this one in React testing library, the item is getting called twice, whereas with the item in Enzyme it's being called once. So if we've got a 4x here, this is going into the state 4 times. It means we're calling this particular line 4 times, whether that be through an action as the user's clicking, where making sure it's in the order, or whether it's setting the order of the user. And you can see down here we've got 2 actions in here to kind of accommodate what I just mentioned. And then down here we're hitting the in order, which is good. So we're doing the remove and the add. We can see that's been covered. Let's jump back. We can look in the menu and zoom in here. So let's have a look. We're at 100 on both here, which is nice. That's what we're aiming for. Again, here it's run the menu twice, sorry. And then we have also got 100% coverage. We're rendering out 2 items, components, and then we're just doing 1 here. It seems with React testing library, it tends to render the item twice, as in it's going to render it once and it'll render it again, as opposed to Enzyme where it only renders it the 1 time. Any RTL experts out there can probably tell you the difference as to why it does this. There may be some architecture under the hood that it's needed to do so, but it makes absolutely no difference in terms of the test time or anything along those lines. But I just wanted to give you a quick coverage report and show you how that looks. And next, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be looking at the order.spec over in Enzyme. And once we've done that, we'll write it over here in React testing library. So if we just copy that, give it a save, give that a save too. We've got the mount in here from Enzyme, just like the previous file. We have the order component in both files. We have the 2 burritos from the fixture. And you'll see something a little bit different over in here, which is the before each cleanup. And we're getting the cleanup from React testing library. And the reason we're doing that simply is on each particular iteration of a test. So if you go from one test to another test, we want to clean up the DOM. Whereas with Enzyme, it'll clean it up for you. And with React testing library, if you don't do that in there, you could render out the DOM once and then render it twice, and you could have a failing test because you've still got elements from the previous iteration that are still sat there in the DOM. So let's take a look at order.spec over in Enzyme. So we're going to be taking a look at this order.spec, and you can still see we're still in the Enzyme workspace, as with this one we're in the testing RTL workspace. The cleanup, actually, coming from a JavaScript background before React myself, you'll notice that we're doing this before each to make sure we're doing the cleanup as just mentioned, but I guess the more specific terminology as to what's going on is it's cleaning each render each time within React. So each time this test runs, what we're basically doing is unmounting the React trees that were mounted by using the render, and failing to say call cleanup within this before each when we've done a render over a component not only results in stuff like memory leaks if you've got a bunch of components in there, but you will get errors and failed tests due to the stuff of the component laying around, and it's very difficult to debug. So if you're running iterations over various components that are the same, make sure you either use before each or after each and you pass cleanup in here. You can actually use this as a function itself, so you could just like invoke it like that, but do that obviously in a before each or a after each. So this test is going to be a little bit easier and a little bit quicker to write. We can go back to the previous file and simply, let's just grab the mount out of there so we'd have to rewrite that once more. And in this iteration, I'll just say, it renders the order summary with 2 burritos. And that's basically what we want to check. We want to check if we give the order component a prop with order items of 2 burritos, are those 2 burritos in there? And if so, great. We can make these tests more extensive by checking for like different types of burritos, if just really going granular on the test. But for this video, I just wanted to give you a quick introduction as to how we can do this in both both packages. So let's go ahead and just do order, and then we're going to pass in order items. In this case, we'll take the burritos, get rid of that, and we'll save that. So that looks good to me. We can start using the wrapper. So let's just say expect, and we're not expecting export, so I shall get rid of that in a second. Let's get rid of that so it doesn't confuse anyone. We'll say expect wrapper.find, and we're going to say data test ID equals order item, because we have that data test ID sat in the order component, which is in here. And we'll search for order item. There it is. That's the line. Get rid of that. And then what we can do, we can just do a dot length, and we're going to expect this to be 2, similar to what we did in the previous file. And then in here we can just copy that, and we can say, okay, we expect the name. Again, we already have the order name, but we're just passing in the burrito ID that never changes. And we'll say the text, and we'll say we want it to be, let me grab the burrito emoji, wet burrito. So there we are. And likewise, we want to do something similar with the spice. So in here, I'll say order spice 1.text to be chili. Perfect. And then I think we had a name in here. So we had wet burrito. I didn't actually add in any sort of burrito for the menu, but for the order, we want to get them to order as soon as possible. So we're going to make them a bit hungry by showing them some sort of burrito emoji. So here, let's just say the order name that we're expecting for the order name 2, because we've already got an order name in there. Let's take the burrito. Give me that. We can split these up here. So we can say, okay, these 3 lines are for the first burrito. The second one can be, let's save that for the next burrito, which from the fixture file, you will see it's called poncho burrito. And then likewise, we want to make sure that it's not just showing 1 chili, we want 2 chilies now. And then down here, we can do another it, and we're going to say it renders the order summary with no burritos. Because we don't just want to check that it's rendering the order summary with 2 burritos or 5 burritos or whatever it may be. We also want to see that the component can handle no burritos, because that's a real scenario when you hit the page. So we're going to give the wrapper in there, and we're going to say expect wrapper.find data test ID equals order heading nothing. And then we'll say dot text to be, and what was it? Let's have a look. Order. It looks like you have an empty stomach order now. Perfect. Save that. And then what we can go ahead and do, we can run this test. Testing enzyme. And we'll just run this, and then we can get the coverage as well to make sure we have the coverage. Hopefully this test runs and we've got a perfect test. There goes the menu. That's good. Let's get the order. Oh, what did we get? We have 2 chilies, and it's expected 2 chilies. We've given it 1, and this test is failing on renders the order summary with 2 burritos. So did we give it? Oh, make sure you pay close attention to what you're expecting here. So we have the wet burrito, which is order name 1, and then we have the order spice as 1, order name 2, because these are the IDs from the fixture file. Save that, and we can go ahead and run this once more, and hopefully that should fix our test in Enzyme. And there we are. Perfect. So now we have 100% over the statements, the branch, the functions, and lines. So if I pull up the coverage file now, you shall see that we have 100% coverage, and we are on to a winner. So if I pull this up here, still the same, it's hitting the menu. Enzyme's hitting it twice now, which is great. And then if we're doing, let's have a look, we just did the order, zoom in on this. Oh, so it's hitting it twice now. So React testing library actually hits it twice, and so does Enzyme. So we must be rendering, let's have a look. So we've got the, hopefully everyone can see this. We have the order with the order items, and we're passing in the order items twice, simply because we're running that small test twice. Likewise with the menu. So let's go ahead and have a look at the menu. There we are, nice, perfect, some perfect tests. So yeah, when I was comparing that with RTL earlier, I did mention that it was running it, is it running it once or twice? And if we just go quickly take a look at the menu, so if I just close this down, we've got the menu, which is here in its own describe block, which is running the test for the menu, and it seems to be hitting it twice. Still a little strange why that hits it twice when it's only rendering it the one time here in the mount. Likewise with the order, you kind of expect it to because it's mounting it twice, but nevertheless that's a very minuscule detail. I'm sure someone from either the contributors or someone who is an absolute expert in both of these will be able to clear that up. But what we want to focus on is getting confidence in our test, and this is not a bad test actually. I would add more in here, but there's obviously a limited time, and you don't want to go, as mentioned earlier, too granular in what you're actually testing. You do want to test as much as possible though to get as much confidence. So now I want to show you how to do this in React Testing Library. So if I go ahead, just pull this to the side here, and we're just going to copy this because we're essentially going to be using the same iteration of this test, but I'm going to show you how to do it in RTL. And one of the things is don't go too overboard with writing as many, well, writing this out manually all the time. It's very easy to just go in like I have and switch these out. And we're just going to go to the order items, switch out the two burritos, delete these lines, save that. We don't need all this anymore. We just basically need get all by test ID to make sure we've got the two in there like we did. And we're just going to use the get by text in this case. So now we can just, let's grab an expect out of here, and we'll say what we want is get all by test ID, order item, length to be 2, and then what we'll say here, get by text, and we need a burrito. So let's grab one from here. Actually, we could just steal that. Let's steal it. Okay, so we need the get by text, and we're going to say that we want the burrito to be in there, but we don't care about the length no more. We just want to just say to be truthy. Likewise, we're going to do the same for the chili. So let me get the chili as well. So if I go ahead in here, change this to the chili, and then I'll take both of these actually, because this one here, as you have seen in Enzyme, this one right here, we want the poncho burrito, which we're going to replace this with. And as you can see down here, we're no longer using the test ID in React Testing Library. We're just going to say, is there two chilies on the page next to each other? And we expect them to be true, so let's just clean those out. And lastly, what you also want to do, which we'll do in a second for Enzyme, which I haven't added in, we want to check the price. So we're going to, actually we'll add that one in there. that would not work, but we just want to say, does this come to £12? And we would expect so if we look in the two burritos. So you'd expect 5 plus 7, yes, that's right, £12. And we could individually check these as well. So if I just pull up let's have a look here, Bart's Burritos, we also have a price, so we could also check for this. So let's go ahead and check that £5 is, so if we had the wet burrito, then we had the poncho, let's check that it's £5. 5, 7, 7, and then the total should be 12, and we can let's just put it like that. That's fair enough. So let's put that over here. And firstly, before going back and just making sure the text is in there for the 5 and the 7 and the 12, we want to just finish this last test, which is this one right here. We can just pull that over. We say renders the order summary with no burritos, and we're just going to say render get by text, and then we're just going to say expect. We can steal this actually, and what we're going to say, instead of doing by text, was again just going to go back to our good old to be truthy, and there we are. We've done get by text here. Expect get by text should be there, and let's put that there. That looks good to me. So let's go ahead, run this, see if we can get the same sort of coverage, and then we'll look at them both in a second. And there we go. Everything has passed, 100% on everything. And if I just pull up the coverage for RTL, React Testing Library, refresh, go back, 100% on absolutely everything here. Item, that gets rendered by the menu, but let's check out the order. As you can see, 4 statements, branches, functions. But yeah, it looks good. So yeah, that's RTL or React Testing Library, however you want to abbreviate it or say it fully, in its fullest form. We do have to go back to the Enzyme test right now, and we have to make some slight modifications so we can get the price, which is 5. So if we just look at order, and then we can see that each, I think it's the item, there should be a sign. Oh no, we're looking at the order.spec, order.js, sorry. And we're going to be looking at the price, so here will be the price. In RTL, you can see it's much easier to do this. You don't have to actually do anything but just expect the price to be there. So one thing you could do here is we obviously need to check for a test ID of some sort, and we have one here. So what we could do, it's already in a span, and we're just going to do an adjacent span, which gives us a test ID of order price. That seems to make logical sense. And then what we will do here, we'll just put the price in there. Let's just see if that works now. We can go back, we're going to test it in Enzyme, close that down, just hopefully we don't get any sort of failures. I'll just pull this to the side for now because we're kind of done with the RTL stuff at this point. So in here, what we're looking for is we want some sort of price. So where we've got the spice, let's expect the price to be order price 5, and then we should, because we're rendering this out 2 line items here, we want to make sure that this one comes in at 7, and then also the total price here is going to be this order total, so we can use that as well. And we'll just say order total, and that should be 12. So if we go ahead, I'll just close these so it's a bit nicer, run this test in its fullest form, and hopefully we should have 100%. If not, we can always go back and modify. That's what's great about this. We're doing some modifications, checking our tests all work. There we are, 5. So we ran into the same trap as before that I did in Enzyme, because I always seem to get the data test IDs wrong when I do the copy. So here you got the 5, and also here should be the 2, and that should fix it. It's only one failure, so that fix should hopefully just run straight through. Figure out that it's passed. We have the menu, brilliant, and then we have the order. So as we can see, you can get 100% without actually checking for certain stuff on the page, whether that be in Enzyme or React Testing Library or some other library that's out there that does your unit tests or integration tests. but we want full confidence. So that's why I wanted to add that in there. I wanted to make sure that we have the price not just for React testing library, but also for Enzyme. So if we just do a split comparison here, you can see, I guess from a readability standpoint, this is quite messy, and there's ways to sort that out. But I just love having selectors, like just being able to select by text and not using data test IDs everywhere, only where they're actually needed. But yeah, I absolutely love React testing library. I was a former Enzyme user, and I have made the switch. So yep, 100% on both. That's React testing library versus Enzyme. So I guess in this video what I wanted to focus on was showing you the differences between Enzyme and React testing library, how you can write tests in both, how Enzyme also does allow you to write from a user's perspective, whereas you can also do the implementation testing, whereas React testing library kind of forces that on you, and I think that's a good thing. And if you are moving from Enzyme to React testing library, I recommend having an open mind and just be willing to think about your tests in a different way. Be willing to think from a user's perspective and not about what sort of props get passed in or how you handle state. I strongly believe that React testing library is only just getting better and better, and even in its form now, it's absolutely incredible, and it allows me to write tests quicker. There's more context to the test if someone's reading them. Users who I guess open this file, I say users, developers can easily take a look and figure out what's going on. And I did mention like Enzyme is far more complex both internally and externally, and I guess it's fairly slow to implement support for like new React features as mentioned, like hooks for example, whereas with React testing library it seems effectively we don't have to wait for that support to come, because React testing library is built in such a way that you are testing the behavior, and we don't care about how React is doing some sort of rendering as long as it renders those particular components or components that you care about. So React testing library only basically cares about the endpoint, what's shown on the page. So the both Enzyme and React testing library have great documentation, as I did show earlier, and I'll quickly show as I wrap up this video. And I do believe, I can say from my experience, that Enzyme allows you to lean towards testing the implementation, such as the state and the props and everything else in between, whereas RTL just leans you towards testing the user's behavior. You can just see quickly from these files, which is a lot easier to read. And now also I think when I started using Enzyme and then I started using React testing library later on in my development career, I found the barrier to entry for React testing library was much lower, and teaching junior developers how to write unit tests now, granted we didn't test absolutely everything here because I wanted to keep this video as short as possible, even if this is like an hour long, but I wanted to show you that it's very easy to get set up in React testing library, and with the testing library cheat sheet, and yes, there's cheat sheets out there for Enzyme, but you can find those that cheat sheet fairly easy. Just go on there, you can understand what's going on. Get by text makes so much sense to me just by using that function, and we can just test this on the page. So I guess to wrap this up, React testing library, give it a shot. It guides us to think more about the best practices, as I mentioned, like way at the beginning in this, so stuff like accessibility, selectors, all this cool stuff that just basically allows you to write very simple and elegant unit and integration tests. Test as much as possible, because that's where you get the confidence. You saw that I could easily hit 100% on this test, but we didn't have many expecs in there. Nor if I was to put this into some sort of production environment or testing environment before going into production, I would write many more tests in these files. I'd obviously test for stuff like the logos there, the headers there, everything a user would expect to see that I've implemented in my development process. So let me know your thoughts, which you prefer, and if you're a React testing library user and you've never used Enzyme, great, fantastic. Also, do feel free to check out Enzyme, just see how you can test in Enzyme, because you know, these packages and these libraries and everything else that you I guess install as you start seeing all these dependencies, dev dependencies do change quite often, so it's nice to pick something up that was very easy to learn. But yeah, we could in the future look at some more advanced stuff, you know, start looking through, you know, Jest and how we could mock stuff, and start using Spy on and all the good stuff we've been testing. I really do enjoy testing. It gives you so much confidence in your application, and also I guess it makes you, or it's made me, a much better developer by learning what is actually being rendered, and it allows you to sometimes change the implementation when you realize you've actually gone down the wrong path. But yeah, thanks for watching this video. It's much appreciated, and I would love to hear your comments on Enzyme and React Testing Library.